All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I am Damon Pistolke, your host, and I am excited for our guest today because we have Noah Pusey here today talking about the financial ROI of culture. Noah with Ripple Analytics. Welcome.
Thanks, Damon. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on your show.
Man, I am excited because as we were talking about beforehand, the very thing that you do happened to align with the client I was talking with today. So it's going to be awesome talking about that. We're going to talk a bit about employee engagement, feedback on the culture work that you're trying to do in your organization, and those dreaded annual performance reviews. So Noah, let's start back a few years. Talk about your background. You went to school and became a lawyer, and then you ended up, I want to start a company that's helping businesses understand their employees better. Tell us about
in a nutshell, I had practiced law I still practice law on the side a little bit, just keep the brain sharp. Yeah. But I practiced law up until about 2014. One of my best friends, Derek Hedges, had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, stage 4. And he really was looking to identify a way of leaving an imprint on business. He got his MBA from Michigan. He worked at a Fortune 500 company up in Boston. And so we started spitballing, and we started talking about the things people like about being employed and things people don't like. At the time, I was managing my own law firm. He had a bunch of people directly reporting to him. And we had both gone through the cycle of annual reviews at the end of 2013, beginning of 2014. And so we started doing some research, and we found that most people found the annual review, both management side and labor side, executives, managers, owners, and the people that come and punch the clock, didn't like the annual review. It was anxiety ridden. It wasn't particularly productive. It was largely a compliance exercise, meaning, check the box every year. You got to do it. I worked for a couple big firms out of law school, and I readily identified with the research we arrived at, meaning, you get your 20 minutes a year to talk with your boss. Now, maybe that works, maybe in 1950, possibly could maybe work in 1960. But if you fast forward to 2014 at the time, and certainly now 2023, and you're implementing a communication-based process where you speak with your direct reports 20 minutes a year of meaningful conversation, I shouldn't have to convince anyone that that's a broken model. With the influence of technology today, with the instant feedback, certainly millennials, Gen Zers get on a minute-to-minute basis. If you look at what when we were cutting our teeth with emails, right, back in the 90s and 2000s, now you've got Instagram, you've got TikTok, you've got this instant message, instant fulfillment society. Well, if I'm a 51-year-old manager and I'm telling my 26-year-old employees, listen, I'm going to talk to you next December about everything that happened over the last 12 months, they're going to look at me cross-eyed, and they're going to say, well, what do you mean? The human brain, we were talking about your client in terms of the psychologists involved. The human brain only remembers things accurately for 6 to 8 weeks. So then again, these points, these factual information tidbits, if I tell you that your brain only really remembers things accurately for 6 to 8 weeks, and then on the next sentence I say, and by the way, you're going to review your people based on the last 12 months, how do you marry those two components up? You can't. And so what we did is we worked with an IO psychologist, Dr. Frank Schipper. I spoke with him earlier today, great guy. And we said, how do we make something more effective? How do we make something that is actionable, provides actionable information? And Ripple was born. We spitballed, and we said, is it better to do it quarterly, every 6 months? And we found that it was on a monthly frequency that you really want your feedback to be shared. And we in working with Dr. Schipper, the interconnected feedback loop is what Ripple's all about. We're a team-based model, and everyone on your team gives and receives feedback from everybody else. So it's not the hierarchical approach of 10, 15 years ago, where the manager, reviews his or their direct reports. It's, I want to give information to Damon. Damon wants to give information to Susan. Susan wants to give information to Linda. Linda wants to give information to me. And oh yeah, our manager is also in the loop, so that the manager gets and receives and gives feedback about the people that they interact with and that they're managing. And what we really wanted to do, the goal of Ripple, was to empower managers to be better. You've heard the stat, everyone listening has heard the stat, 80% of people that quit their jobs are quitting their managers. So it's not 5%, it's not 17%, it's 80%. That's an incredible number. So what are organizations doing to make their managers better, to make their managers better managers? And so Ripple offers the data. Ripple gives information that managers can use in making data-driven decisions. And that's, we're all about data, obviously. And if you don't have some component of your business operations focused on data analytics, then you're probably missing opportunities to grow and to scale.
Yeah. And honestly, in our work with client work, the analytics is where a lot of people still struggle. They have some, they got the financial data. Yeah, people can get that because they got to balance the checkbook and all that good stuff at the end of the day, or get their investor reports right. But the analytics around, and especially around people, culture. I mean, are we hiring the right people that blend in with us? I mean, I got so many questions that we're going to start, because it's going to be
or are you hiring enough people with diverse experiences enough to make your teams more dynamic? You're not just hiring clones. You're not just hiring, one size fits all. And that's 2023. Again, not to beat a dead horse, but in 1950, maybe you can do that. In 1960, maybe. But now, and by the way, when I say maybe you can do it, maybe you can get away with it in 1950, 1960. It doesn't mean it was ever right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, managers have learned from poor managers who've learned from poor managers over multiple decades, if not forever. What we're trying to really do is disrupt that whole concept of, using data to make better decisions. Yeah. And by the way, it takes away one of the biggest concerns that employees have with the annual review, is that there's an incorporation of unintentional bias. And it's very important. That first word is very important. It's unintentional. It doesn't mean, we're all human beings. So we all have likes and dislikes based on stuff that have nothing to do with the day-to-day operations of a business. And if we're the same sport, we were talking about the Seattle Seahawks earlier. If I was a Seahawks fan, we'd be talking a lot longer about it. I'm a football fan, so we can talk a little about it. But then if I review you versus reviewing Dan, and Dan doesn't like sports or doesn't play sports, what does that matter at all? If I'm running a firm that provides a service to clients, it should not matter that Dan's not a sports fan. Mm-hmm. And yet, unintentionally, it might. So we're trying to remove all of that. We're trying to, or at the very least, limit it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good stuff. So as we talk about this, and you were going, so the impetus to start Ripple was really to overhaul the way that we really, and I don't even like to use the word assess people, or how we're gelling. What was the real impetus behind it all?
It was the time and effort it took to do something that both Derek and I knew wasn't effective.
Yeah.
It was basically, what are we wasting our time? And by the way, you research it. If you look at some of the bigger companies in America, Accenture, right? 200,000 plus employees in 2016, they got rid of their annual review because the president and CEO of Accenture said, why are we doing it? And no one could give him an answer that made any sense. And with 200,000 plus employees, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people hours invested in a process. So when the president says, what are we doing it for? You can't, show them a report, show them the data, show them some sort of ROI on why you're doing this exercise that, again, probably included, I'd have to estimate that a company like Accenture has hundreds of people in their HR department.
Yeah.
Constantly trying to gather this information, cull it together. And by the way, it's a completely flawed system in most organizations, because you know, if you have the 360 where you're actually getting and giving information from your coworkers, any big organization is prone to encounter some form of gamification for those types of processes. I know a person that's been in big pharma for 20 plus years, and he shared with me when I was sharing him what we were doing with Ripple. He goes, yeah, every year I just change the name on my 360 report and send it in. Change the date and the name. So he's got the same description of how they're interacting with that person, the same description of how that person helped them, same description of some of the critiques for 7, 8 people on their team. And it's telling on two fronts. One, the person I know, the employee, doesn't really care enough to give genuine feedback to his or her coworkers. But also, if he's working at this company for 5, 6, 7 years and the manager doesn't realize that all of his 360 reports are identical except for name and date, that means the manager's not looking at the reports. That means they're just checking the box and they're moving on. So if you're doing that, then why do it at all? Goldman Sachs got rid of their traditional annual review process. GE got rid of their traditional annual review process. And largely the argument against the traditional annual review process was, show me the ROI, show me what this does to move the needle. And when you can't answer that question, then you either replace it with something that's more dynamic or you just get rid of it altogether until you find that dynamic replacement.
That was a lot, and it was awesome. Just have to say, I'm writing feverishly here because we've got a lot of questions.
Sure.
Now, I've got a lot of questions because these companies obviously didn't just wake up one day and go, we're throwing this out the door because it's too big a decision. So, and you make a great point about the 360 reviews and the copy paste. And even I would come back to say, even if I'm managing it, it's the old traditional, I write a review, you write it, your self review, doing the same damn thing in a lot of cases, even because you're going back and looking at it anyway. And you still need to work on that.
Think about the process. Think about, because when I worked for a big firm out of law school, it was, have you done it yet? Have you done it yet? Have you done it yet? HR emails. Have you done it yet? Have you done it? So finally, it's like, you know what? I haven't done Damon's review, but I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to get through it Friday afternoon. And I just put something on the paper and I hit send, and HR's off my back for 11 and a half months.
Yep.
So the incentive is to stop getting obnoxious emails, reminder emails from HR versus the incentive of, you know what? I really liked and enjoyed working with Damon. We worked on a couple of projects together, and I think he's got this skill set that's great and this skill set that's great. Maybe he could work on this. Maybe he could work on that. Instead of, just basically allowing coworkers to share anonymously. By the way, Ripple's an anonymous platform. So you can
we'll talk about that.
Yeah, you can be completely upfront about how you feel, and also just to have some productive measure for going through the exercise. And it's like any process in HR, not any, but a lot of the processes in HR, it's checking the box, making sure that you're complying with what you need to comply with.
Yeah. So let's dive in a little bit into Ripple, because I tell you what, I am amazed. I'm not amazed. I'm very interested in the background. So explain what Ripple is a little bit, and then why you kind of do it the way you do it. And then I've got some questions I want to ask around that.
Sure. So Ripple is a feedback platform that allows companies, managers, owners, executives to gather and crunch data to show where their people are stronger, where they might have some blind spots, and could be a strong candidate for some developmental coaching. Ripple also identifies self-awareness. Self-awareness is arrived at by gathering two sets of data points. One, through your self-survey. So every year you complete a 50-question self-survey, and those questions are the questions that your colleagues are answering about you, but you're answering them about yourself. And then the colleague data set. And when you compare those two data sets together, the closer those numbers are, we're a 1 to 5 scale. So let's say you're a 4.2 in conscientiousness. That's what you give yourself. And your people, your coworkers, think you're a 4.1. Then you're self-aware when it comes to conscientiousness.
Yeah.
Why is that important? It might not be if the job function or job role doesn't require high levels of conscientiousness. However, if your job role does, then you marry up the title, the job responsibilities with those personality traits. Ripple gathers data along 5 core personality traits. They're called the Big Five in IO psychology, and they are the most important human, not employee, human personality traits that we all exhibit 24/7.
Yeah.
And at the heart of Ripple is to make sure that Noah from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, is the same Noah from 5:01 to 8:59, Monday through Sunday. Meaning, am I my real self in the workplace? Yeah. Do you get upset? Do you get happy? I mean, sure, you have every personality has ebbs and flows, but am I a consistent person when it comes to who I am? Can my people expect me to be fairly level when it comes to my level various personalities?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you have to be a 5 out of 5 for all of the personality traits. In fact, it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
But one of our personality traits is curiosity. So I always use the example of curiosity. If you have a self-aware person when it comes to curiosity and they've got a high score, so let's say it's a 4.5. If you're looking at a person who's in the accounting department, probably not that important to have high levels of curiosity. But if you're looking to promote within your marketing team, you're going to look at curiosity and say, that's an important personality trait with respect to the job function. So let's look at the data a little deeper. So Ripple is administered on a frequency of monthly. We have done quarterly, we've done weekly. The last thing you want when you're a survey analytics tool is to get to have your users encounter it's called survey fatigue. So we generally look at 5, 6, 7 people on a team tops. So if you have 20 people on a team, you just split that into 3 different teams so that when the person's completing their 5th, 6th, or 7th survey, they're giving accurate, genuine information. And then it's completely customizable. So we have those 5 big 5 personality traits, but then we also know that in various industries and various spaces, you might have KPIs that you want to follow data along. So we help you build out those surveys to make the language, effective in terms of gathering accurate information and working with you so that you can, I think you called it the performance review at one point early in our discussion, possibly before we started.
Yeah. Performance
is always going to be this concept that is very easily measured in certain capacities, right? You have a sales team. Sales team performance would appear to be easy, right? Damon sold 140% over goal. Noah sold 90% of goal. So he was 10% lower. Damon was 40% over. So if I'm a traditional manager of a sales team, I say Damon's the better salesperson and Noah's got issues. We got to talk to him. He's got to get at least a goal. That's the whole point of having that goal, right? However, if you dig deeper and you find out that Damon would walk over his mom to close a deal and stab anybody in the back to close a deal, and that's why he's at 140. Meanwhile, Noah is a mentor to the younger salespeople. He helps. His door's always open. The clients love him. You got to look at other components because if you just look at the P&L, if you just look at the financials behind it, then it's an easy decision, but maybe it's not. And when you look at the 4 or 5 people that quit the team because they couldn't work with Damon anymore, then what is the net impact? What is the ripple effect? That's our scoring system of Damon within the organization compared to Noah's. And it doesn't mean that it certainly does not mean, having run a few businesses, that there's not importance with the 140% of goal, right?
Yeah.
But, and I've used this example the last couple of years, look at the data. And maybe if Damon's a negative, and I don't mean to be picking on you, obviously, but if Damon is a negative influence or toxic co-employee, go hybrid, go remote, tell him to work from home, give him $500 stipend to get a co-workspace, get him out of the office and go do your 140% of goal. But I'm not going to let you influence negatively the people in our office. And that way, just to get back to the whole data-driven decision-making, the manager can sit and tell Damon, listen, we obviously loved 140% of goal. Great job. But you see your data. By the way, every user of Ripple sees their own data. They have access to their own dashboard. So there's no surprise. I'm sure if you have a career like me, you had those annual reviews where you'd be giving them or receiving them, and you'd have the person that sits down and they think they're a rock star. Meanwhile, if you could fire them, you would, but you just can't. And they're expecting a 10% raise and a $50,000 bonus. And you're sitting there like, what do you,
yeah, where are you
who
going?
do you think, yeah, who do you
world
think you
live
are?
it in?
So if you looked at Ripple and you saw your dashboard and you saw your numbers and you realized going into that, annual compensation discussion, that's the point of supplementing the annual review with real data, then that person knows that his expectations should be muted at best. And it also empowers that person to seek advisement, direction, go to their manager, say, I'm just not sure how to become more cooperative. We have a stable of consultants that we have relationships with, that when you have a person that you believe in, but they're coming short on a couple things, you can have that consultant come in and work with that employee. It's a lot easier, unless the employee is a train wreck. It's a lot easier to help that employee progress within your organization than getting rid of that employee and hiring a replacement.
Well, and especially with the difficulty in hiring over the last couple of years, the competition's even worse. So this is awesome. So first of all, actionable data. I mean, this is really something that most performance reviews, annual reviews, whatever, give little to no actionable data. And to have because I'm a KPI freak, right? And the one thing that you really can't measure is how well people are fitting with an organization in a succinct KPI manner. And that is like, to me, that's the third leg of the stool, because you can have an organization that appears to be performing pretty well, but you might have and you do with probably, and you don't even know it, you've got several, could be cultural terrorists in your, and I call them that. I know maybe other people use that word, but I do, because the people that culturally wreck your organization worse than anyone else are so good at it that you don't even know half the time. But when you can get anonymous feedback, I got to believe you can spot that.
It's interesting. I'm in the data analytics space. So Gallup comes out with their engagement numbers every year.
Yeah.
And in 2022, the numbers were interesting. The numbers for engagement actually fell for the first time in a decade. So that's concerning. Yeah. Because what happens when you talk about the cultural terrorists, we'll call them cultural negative influencers,
there
right?
You go.
The people
That's
sabotage central, right? 17% of American employees are actively disengaged. Yeah. So 1 out of 5 essentially are actively disengaged, not just disengaged, ho-hum, kind of going along, not really driving themselves, actively participating in being disengaged. Yep. They want to be disengaged.
Active disengagement. I love it.
So you only have 32% of engaged employees. And that number was at 34 to 36 for the last 5-6 years. The first 2 years of COVID, it didn't even go down, which was kind of cool from if you're either engaged or you're not, essentially was what the data showed. But for the first time in over a decade, the engaged number went down. And that should concern organizations, because it's showing that the negative, those toxic influencers, they're having an impact. Mm-hmm. I mean, it went down 2 points in 1 year from 2021 numbers. And at that, again, we're not talking about, tenths of points of percentage points. We're talking about numbers, 2%. That's a big number.
Well, and how many total, you said it was 30% of total were engaged?
32.
32.
So 1 out of 3.
32, but it went down to 30.
No, it was 30. It hovered between 34 and 36 for the last decade.
Okay, 34 and 36, and it went down to 32. Well, that's a lot as a percentage of the overall
drop. It's a 10% drop.
10% drop. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's like if 10% of your employees are now not engaged that were before, that's huge. Just count across how many employees you got. 1,000 employees. I got 100 employees that are now not engaged that were before. How big a deal is that?
And if it's trending that way, how do you stop it?
Yeah.
How do you stop it from being another 10% next year and another 10% the year
Yeah.
after? One of the key, I love facts, FACTS. I don't particularly use faxes anymore, but and the biggest fact that I've used over the last couple of years is disengagement costs American companies over $500 billion a year.
Wow.
I mean, with a B, American companies spend billions of dollars to avoid corporate theft, meaning people leaving with a ream of paper, a stapler, a laptop every now and then. Corporate theft domestically accounts to about $21 billion in losses. So 21 billion, everyone's got retinal scanners and ID scanners and, the little turnstiles at the elevator, all that stuff. But when I show you that disengagement costs those same companies $500 billion,
yeah,
what are you doing about it? And if you're not doing anything about it, then stop with the retinal scan and stop with the ID passes, because it's a small fraction of the amount of money you're losing to disengagement to corporate theft.
That's for sure.
And again, those are not small numbers. We're not talking about, we aren't talking about small numbers. We're talking about huge organizationally impactful numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you've had Ripple for 8 years now. You've had people that are using this for a while. So what are some of the things that you see when people first start, when they've used this a while, and then when they're mature with the product?
Yeah. So we have first, it's interesting because we've had clients, not many, but we've had some clients that don't like the data, that question the algorithms.
Yeah.
Because I've been working with Damon for 20 years. He certainly this data can't be accurate. And I say to them, I don't know Damon. I've never worked with him, but this is what his coworkers think about him. This is the data that, we do not promote run Ripple for a month and then start firing people. It's an organic exercise. It grows within an organization so that you can gather the data, utilize the data over time. You need statistically relevant data in order to do anything. So the first step is gathering enough data to make sure you can take steps with those individual employees. And when it comes to, kind of the aha moments, it's not like you got 80% of your employees are going to shock you. You're going to see the data as managers, owners, executives, and you're going to say, oh, interesting. Maybe 10, 15% of the time you'll say, oh, I didn't know that about Noah. That's good to know. Or, I didn't know about Noah. Maybe we should consider getting him help. One of the biggest things we try to instill in our clients is, most human beings, their personality traits are largely in place by the time they're 10 to 12 years old. So when you're talking to a 45-year-old, or certainly a 25-year-old, or a 63-year-old, you're talking with somebody whose personality traits are going to have largely been developed. So when you look at his or her information or the data on, consistency, that's one of the personality traits we track.
Yeah.
Well, if you're just not naturally consistent at 45, 63, even 32, the chances of you becoming naturally consistent are very small. However, the chances of realizing why it's important to be consistent, even if you're not, and the importance of a manager saying, okay, Noah's not consistent, let's not put him in a job role that stresses consistency or cooperation or conscientiousness or any of the other personality traits, so that when I know I'm not naturally curious, right? And you constantly put me in charge of redesigning the website or working with the marketing team or advertising. And that stresses me out because I know I'm not naturally curious. And now managers and the employees are armed with this information where a manager can say, oh, you know what? I should actually talk to Susan. Her curiosity numbers are great. And Noah breathes a sigh of relief because he knows they revamp the website every 18 months. And he knows that he's done it the last 3 times, but he hates it. Yeah. But I can't tell my manager I hate it because that old, traditional approach to management is if I complain, then I'm a problem. Versus if I offer suggestions is what we really should be asking for as managers. How can I make the team better? And that doesn't mean the manager follows everything. It doesn't mean the manager is required to do anything. But wouldn't it be great if managers acted more on objective data than subjective opinions? And
Yes.
one of our clients used Ripple data with respect to a management change a few years ago. That's what we want to see. We want to see positively changing their workplace environment based on data and decisions that arose out of that data.
Yeah, and I've got this. You're again. I just think you're putting numerical data or even just comments and things around that's meaningful rather than once a year we sit down and go, what can I remember? Write it down, get through the whole
If
thing.
nothing else, and we do talk, we're not big fans of the annual review for all the reasons I've set forth.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do the annual review, at least give the manager, give that team leader information that's been gathered throughout the year. It takes a very dynamic manager to take notes throughout that 12-month period, accurate notes, not notes after they just got off a heated call with a client. So those notes might be, influenced negatively about that. But actual, accurate, genuine notes, it takes a very dynamic, very few of them do it. So at the very least, the Ripple dashboard with commentary, we offer commentary. Users can offer 255 characters of comments for each question, but you can see the global last 12 months, and you can see it on your dashboard. And when you go into that meeting with your 6, 7, 8 people on your team, you can have a meaningful discussion, because the discussion will largely be already on the screen. I mean, the person going into that meeting who's looked at his or her data, and the manager who's having that meeting with that person has looked at his or her data. It's going to be a much more meaningful and arguably faster conversation.
Yes. So you mentioned this, and now the whole reasoning behind Ripple is because the annual reviews aren't productive. How does it look when you're using Ripple? Because I just, as you were saying this, I'm like, okay, now we don't have an annual review. What do we do? What do using Ripple? How does this work?
So we've always championed and we fully support the concept of an annual compensation discussion.
Okay.
The compensation discussion cannot happen every month. It would, be financially reckless to even think about doing that. What we say is Ripple is an annual review. It's just done monthly. It does exactly what the annual review is supposed to do, but it just does it monthly so that it's more timely, more actionable, more genuine. So, we're not saying you shouldn't assess your people. We're saying that you should assess your people should assess your people, and you get a bigger, more meaningful picture of how everyone's interacting and how everyone's benefiting from that interaction. And by the way, we know that some teams are great and some teams aren't, and some teams are, kind of flying in the middle. It's okay, and we are not suggesting that Ripple is going to show you that 100% of your employees are great, whatever great means.
Yeah.
Because we aren't accountants. I'm a lawyer, but we aren't medical practice owners. We aren't financial service firm owners. We're people analytics. We are human being. We know the psychology of the employees that work in an organization. The industry specific stuff we lead to the owners of those businesses.
Yeah. So you're doing those reviews monthly, and still but that allows you to do that annual compensation conversation much more productively, because it's not, like you said, it's not a surprise if you come in and your monthly reviews have been so. Damon's an okay person, so okay overall, but not stellar, to come in and expect a stellar performance review, or not stellar annual increase comparatively, if you haven't seen that you're a stellar performing in a stellar fashion throughout the year. I'm trying to choose my words because
I think what is interesting about the component of the performance of an employee is, to get back to a point I made earlier. When you're talking about a sales team, you can at least have even if it's a sketch, you have a picture of what that person has meant from a financial component to the office. when you law firms are the same thing, right? Law firms, the almighty billable hour. So if I build 2,200 hours in a year and the requirement is 2,000, I'm a rock star. They don't care if I'm horrible, if I'm great, if I like working with my coworkers, if I scream at clients, all that stuff. If I build 200 hours extra, because it's a calculator exercise, right?
Yeah.
$450 an hour, $525 an hour times 200. The firm's like, yeah, people don't like him, but he just made us X numbers of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
In a lot of companies, that's not the case. A lot of companies, there aren't those metrics that are so obvious. And so when you talk about the net impact, again, our scoring system is called the ripple effect score.
Yeah.
Everything you do during your interaction with fellow coworkers has an impact on those people, good, bad, or otherwise. And if you understand that and you can appreciate that, how you do things is as important as what you're doing. I was reading a book, Love as a Business Model, and it was basically saying that, and it sounds a lot, not corny, but it sounds a lot more emotional. The concept is be nice to people.
Yeah.
Understand that what you do and how you do it is important. And even if it's something that's tough to do, understand that person is a human being, and they're going to, one of the goals Derek and I had when we were mapping out Ripple was, let's try to make people's lives better. And if they're happier in work, if they're more self-aware about their impact in the workplace, they're going to take it home with them. If I have a good Friday, I have a good weekend, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and if I have a crappy Friday, it's probably not going to be the greatest weekend because I'm going to be thinking about why Friday didn't go so great.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe most of the people I've met in my professional and personal life want to be happy. And it's a question of providing tools that perpetuates that desire to be happy. And I mean, I say it all the time, and I've been on a few podcasts, so I'm sure some of the listeners maybe have heard, culture is not beanbags. Culture is not foosball tables.
Yeah.
Culture is not happy hour. Mandatory. I love this. And maybe we've talked about this. Mandatory happy hours on Thursdays. How do you have a mandatory happy hour? That's not culture. Those are all results of good culture. If I want to play ping pong with you after a long day's work, that means I like you. And that, we can kind of, talk about the day, talk about the week, playing ping pong. That's great. But if I don't like you, I don't care what you have in the lunchroom. I'm not playing foosball, ping pong. I'm not doing anything. I'm running out of the door. And so what we want to do is we want to show companies, to bring it full circle. And the title of our discussion is the ROI of culture, the ROI of using data to figure out, do you have engagement? And if you don't, how do we engage our employees? How do we get them to the promised land of wanting to receive feedback, utilize that feedback, and make the office place a better place to work? We're not utopic in thinking that people are going to skip down the sidewalk going to work. What we are driven by is providing a workplace, and over the last 3 years, obviously defining a workplace has become trickier and trickier, but providing a workplace where people can enjoy what they do with people they don't mind being around. Yeah. And that's culture. If you work with people that you want to see succeed, and Damon's working on that project, that if I help him for a couple hours, he'll be able to get out of here earlier, and I'm going to do that, that's culture. Yeah. And that's what we want to do. We want to provide the information, the data to managers and owners to really appreciate whether they have that. And if they don't, adopting measures to try to get there.
Yeah. And with what you're doing, you're giving them and the people a way to see if the changes, the things they're trying to help with, are making positive effect. And you're measuring it consistently enough to know, are we doing it? Because you wait for a year, you wasted a year, and you really don't know if whatever we're trying to do is helping. But with what you're saying, say Damon's that salesperson that needs to be out working out in the field by himself, right?
Yeah, working on an island. Great on that island, not good in the office. You make that change, you're going to see what that looks like in a month or two. Yep. 100%.
And the rest, everybody else will go, oh, he's a lot nicer person now. Oh, he's not.
And so when Damon's in the office 3 days a month instead of 5 days a week, people are going to like, oh, maybe there's a different side to him. And Damon's going to realize, maybe I'm not a 9 to 5 in the office type of person.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the other data might suggest that, if my numbers in consistency are all over the place, right? We chart it out so you can see it visually.
Yeah.
You can see the data. Well, and I go to my manager and I say, I want to work from home. My managers can say, no, check out your data on consistency. You're all over the place. You can't work from home. You need the structure of coming to the office 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. It's nothing personal. It's not because our kids aren't on the same soccer team, or because I like skiing and you don't like skiing, or I like the Seahawks, you don't like the Seahawks. Nothing personal. Look at the data.
Yeah.
And when I say, oh, I know that manager's letting Damon work from home because that manager likes Damon more, I looked at the data. I'm like, oh, okay. It's hard to argue with the position of the manager in that situation. Not 93% of organizational leaders think culture is a top three item.
Yeah.
16% of those same leaders think their culture is where they want it. So that gap is enormous. So what are you doing about it? If you know you're not there, if you acknowledge that you're not there, are you doing the same thing to try to get there? Because it's not working. It's not, and one of the most important things that we preach in terms of getting, receiving, and crunching the feedback is do something with it, because there's nothing worse in terms of data analytics, engagement, feedback, to tell your people we care, we want to hear what you're saying, complete these surveys, let's see the data, and then you sit on it.
Yeah.
And you sit on it because all the people are like, wow, they finally are asking us about what we think about our coworkers, our workplace, all these things. Yep. And then they sit and they wait and they look for the initiatives and they look for the solutions, and nothing happens.
Yeah.
Well, they jump to conclusions, and then they think, well, the data must have been not that great. I was prospecting a huge international cosmetics company, and the president of domestic operations had about 20 some odd thousand people under his watch. And I had 3 or 4 conversations with him about Ripple, and he loved it. He was retiring, unfortunately, 6 months after I first met him. But they had hired a big consulting firm to come in and measure the level of their culture. And essentially, it boiled down to the following question: would you refer a friend or family member come work at this company? Because if you do, it's a very common question in terms of trying to gauge culture. Because if you do, then chances are you like where you work. So they surveyed everybody. They surveyed the executives and they surveyed the employees. The employees said 22, it was anonymous, supposedly. It was 22% said yes. And the executives thought that it was going to be 81 or 82%. So it's not the fact that they were off, it's how far they were off.
Yeah.
The disconnect, the 93% of the organizational leaders knowing their culture is one of the top 3, but only 16% think that their culture is where it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing about it?
Yeah. What are you doing about it? Yeah. And it blows me away with the cultural challenges we have. The fact blows me away that is that far, the 90 whatever percent, it's top 3 and 16, because just the difficulty in keeping or finding and retaining good employees, the cost of that turnover is, billions of dollars, trillions, maybe even on an annual basis for companies. And it is not easy to do, but it's not that expensive or difficult to do if you really want to do it.
So one last stat about those organizational leaders: 69% of those leaders, of those executives, don't think they invest enough in achieving strong culture in their organization.
Yeah.
So 70%, they're not investing enough. And yet 93% say it's a top 3 item. There's such a disconnect when it comes to those statistics. It's mind numbing to me. Ripple should be all over the place. People should be, beating down my door, and I say this unabashedly, if not Ripple, something else. Use one of our competitors. Do something. Because if you're doing the same thing you've done for the last 10 years and your culture still is misaligned, and one stat I love using when I speak with business valuation geeks: cultural alignment in terms of the value of an organization. So if you have a smaller company or even a bigger company, closely held, and you want to get your maximum sales price, your maximum valuation. If
Yeah.
you have culturally misaligned people, 50% of potential acquirers will walk away
Yep.
from that deal. And then
Easy.
another 23% will reduce the value of that business acquisition by 22%. So if you're selling for 10 million, you're selling for 8.
Yeah.
And what blows me away is the millennials want it. They expect it.
Mm-hmm.
Gen Z wants it. They expect it. They want the feedback. They need the feedback. So it's not like I'm not going to baby boomers saying you've got to do this. You're going, as the leaders of an organization, you're going to your younger generational workforce saying, I know you want it. Here you go.
Yeah. And I'll go one better on that too, because I think the Gen Xers and the baby boomers would have liked it all along and would love it if it's there, but they never even knew it was a potential because they got stuck with the junk for so long.
Yep.
You know, it's just this. I mean, yeah, it's awesome. And you're right with value, because I can tell you, we have had clients in the past that the culture was not so great over the past decade. And you will have people, I think it's even more drastic. If you come back if a buyer comes in, you can feel the culture. You can feel the culture. And when you feel that culture is bad, that's enough for most of them to turn around.
Yep.
They'll turn around. It's just good because they are investing too many millions of dollars to have, and they know the importance of people and how it'll make or break your company. They will just walk away.
And the risk, right? The risk of if you have a good company and you acquire another company and there's a toxicity to those people that you're acquiring, whether they're voluntarily being toxic or whether they've just kind of developed over years, the impact, remember the actively disengaged numbers versus the engaged numbers, the numbers for active disengagement are going up and engagement's going down. So you take the risk as company A buying company B. Company A has great culture, great people. I love them. I just want to expand, growth by acquisition, whatever your model is. And I acquire 50% of new people are toxic.
Yeah.
Well, the impact on my great people it's real. And the risk of it is real.
Yeah.
And maybe your people win out in the end, but what if you lose 20% of them?
Yeah.
25% of them?
That's a huge thing.
It's a huge thing. And it does have, I mean, the ROI is not just, I want Damon to come to work and be smiling. There's a financial reason that culture is important. And you touched on it with retention. Some of these companies, the attrition rates are just ridiculous. They can cripple you because you're hiring people. You're not doing what your firm is supposed to be doing. You're in the process of hiring replacements.
Yeah. And that I think is a negative consequence. But when you get the culture right, it's because there's a lot of people that know how to do things, right? And you can do things and you can do them well.
Mm-hmm.
But when you want to do it at an elite level, doesn't matter what you're doing. Could be law, could be making something, could be playing sports. The difference is not in does Damon technically know how or no one technically know how to do it. It's, are they really invested in doing it the best they possibly can? Not just good, but the best they possibly can. And that's what allows companies to dominate and take over markets and do things that people just go, how the hell did they do that? And it's all these things working together. And that culture is like just like a kill shot that is just so, and it's because people are having fun. They might be solving the world's problems, and it can be hard as hell, and they're working like mad to do it. But if the culture is right, they're really engaged and everybody's in it together. It's a beautiful thing that you just can't even, when you're in one of those or get it in multiple times in your life, those are the ones that people look back over their career and they go, that was something special, and we could do special things. And whether, like I said, it's just this culture, the negative, there's negative there, but the positive for these owners of businesses or the investors, whatever, it is far beyond I believe the negative effects of culture is bad, and that can put you out of business. But the other way you can go is pretty dramatic as well.
Yep. Agreed. 100%.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, Noah, it's been awesome talking to you, man. This is such a great conversation. And I know we have James here. We had Farhad has been on with us, and thanks everyone else from listening today. We know I can see the listeners on there. Thanks for being here. Thank you so much for sharing this. Again, we've got Noah Pusey with Ripple Analytics. We're talking about the financial ROI of culture. And if you didn't listen to this whole thing, you need to rewind, go back, rewatch, and listen to it, because you are going to be able to ditch that annual review and turn it into something that's more actionable and more timely with your people, and have a great time. Thanks for being here, Noah.
Damon, thanks for having me.
All right, man. Hang out for a moment. We'll talk, but everyone else, we will be back.